Welcome to the Curious Realm. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the IANDS, International Association for Near-Death Studies Conference here in Salt Lake City, Utah. We are here with Randy Scheifer. He is a near-death experiencer. He is also an author and a panelist here at the conference. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Also, thank you very much for your service as a veteran.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Well, let's get into it, Randy. Exactly how did you come to the point of a near-death experience?
In March of 2020, COVID had swept the world by then. And I was living in Northwest Florida at the time, still am, and I caught COVID. And when I went to my doctor, he just said, "Oh, you have the flu. You need to go home and just rest." Well, 3 days later, I was in the hospital with acute respiratory failure.
Wow!
And went through emergency intubation. And then 2 days after that, I was placed on a helicopter and medevaced over to a larger hospital in Pensacola, Florida, and was put on an ECMO machine, which was basically a heart-lung bypass.
Oh, wow.
Machine. I was in acute respiratory failure, congestive heart failure. 2 days after that, my kidneys failed, so I went on dialysis. My heart enlarged, was throwing blood clots. I was bleeding internally from my veins. So,
wow.
Every organ that I had a collapsed lung. Every organ that I had just started to completely fail. So I was in the hospital a total of 6 weeks, and in a coma for 4 weeks, and a total of 31 days intubated, and just over 2 weeks, about 16, 18 days, I was on heart-lung bypass.
Wow. Wow. And that's just an incredible story to begin with. I'm just trying to absorb it all. I've had numerous family members that had COVID, not to that extent. You were one of the many extreme cases. And even to be able to come out of that is incredible to begin with. What was it that ultimately led to your near-death experience during that hospital stay?
And I don't know when it happened. I mean, real quickly, to quote one of my doctors that came in to see me, when I asked him, I said, "What saved me? How did I get out of all of this?" And he said, "You should be dead."
Yeah.
It's a miracle. So, so I don't know exactly when my near-death experiences occurred, but so it was somewhere between the 29th of March and the 10th of April that I experienced 4 near-death experiences.
Oh, wow.
And on the 10th of April, I was the first person in Northwest Florida to receive convalescent plasma. But during that period of time, I had dreams, and I know what those dreams were. Then I had hallucinations because I was on some pretty heavy medication.
Yeah.
And I know what they are. Some of them were just silly. But then I had this other realm that I traveled to. And I remember telling my daughter when I first saw her, because I did not see any family members for 6 weeks, because if you remember back in March, they closed it down. There was no visitors.
Yeah.
And my daughter, who was vital in my survival, is a nurse. And they finally allowed her in to see me. And I was telling her that I was not there. I said, I traveled. I went somewhere. And she was like, "What are you talking about, Dad? How can you travel?"
Yeah.
But I remember my consciousness waking up, and I was in a tunnel, and it was a fairly dark tunnel, and I don't know how long I was in it, but I was traveling fairly slow through this tunnel. And I remember telling myself, okay, you died, you're dead, but where am I going? And as I was going through this tunnel, occasionally these little light windows would show up along the side of the tunnel, and I saw this magnificent bright light that surrounded the tunnel, and you could feel its warmth and love as you moved through this tunnel, but the light never penetrated the tunnel.
Oh.
And I got out of the tunnel, and I was in a beautiful, beautiful hall, magnificent hall. It had huge vaulted, ribbed ceilings, beautiful chandeliers that lined the center, water features around the center of the hall, beautiful stained glass windows circled the hall. And off to the sides, there was these big archways that looked like maybe a hallway that led to a different portion of the hall that I was in. It was magnificent gold. It was just brilliant color of gold with opaque floors, gold opaque floors. It was beautiful. And at that time, I felt someone that was next to me. I couldn't feel their presence or see their presence, but I could feel it. I knew somebody was there.
Mm.
And within a few minutes, this spirit in human form comes up to me, and we stood for a minute or two talking about the beauty of this room, the wonder of this room. And he said, it was one of our most favorite rooms for people to congregate. He says, but I'm sorry, he said, you don't belong here. You have to leave.
Wow.
And he pointed over to a giant double wooden door. And again, the door was just magnificent oak, all with carvings and inlays and just beautiful. So I went out this door into a golden city. And I started my consciousness. Again, I was bodiless. I didn't have a body. So my consciousness just started moving through this golden city. And again, it was absolutely beautiful. Big sky-rise, golden buildings as far as you could see. Beautiful, beautifully manicured parks, of colors of which don't exist. In my career in the Air Force, I've traveled to the highlands of Scotland and the highlands of Ireland, and I've seen some beautiful dark green grass, but this didn't touch it in its beauty. And as we're moving through the city, I suddenly realized that I was lost, and I couldn't find my way back. And I started to get anxious and scared that I could not find my way back and that I was lost. So I sat down in a panic, and I remember a great anxiety coming over me and fear that I was lost. And I could feel movement around me, and I was crying out, please, somebody help me, I'm lost. But nobody did. Nobody materialized to help me, and I couldn't figure out why. So I remember looking over my right shoulder, and this big, beautiful staircase rose up into the sky. Did not know what it was. All I knew is if I made it to that staircase, maybe I could be found. So I made my way over, And I started to come up the staircase. I don't know how high I got, don't know how long I was on that staircase. But I remember hearing a male voice cry out. And he said, "There's Randy, get him." And it was like somebody grabbed me by my shirt collar and whisked me off of that staircase.
Oh, wow.
And I went back into my dark, sedated world.
That's incredible, Randy. And the first spirit that you ran into, was it somebody that you were familiar with, or
Never saw
anybody
the
that
man.
you know?
No. Nope. He was a short gentleman. He had dark hair and a beard. And like I said, he was in total human form. And I don't know where he came from. All of a sudden he was there,
Yeah.
And he was the first person to tell me that I didn't belong there, that I had to leave.
Wow. And this was your first of 4 near-death experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. At what point did your second near-death experience happen, and what was that like? Because the fact that you got anxious and became scared, how did you process that after you came back? Did you feel comfortable again, or were you still anxious and scared?
When they whisked me off that steps, like I said, I went back into my dark little sedated world, and my conscience was not present. I was just darkness. So all of those feelings immediately disappeared. And a lot of people, now I was not raised religiously, and I was a major skeptic that there was an afterlife. My feeling was, when you turn off the light switch, that's it. You're gone. That's the end. And that scared me. And I was a homicide detective for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So I could deal with other people's death, but I couldn't deal with my own.
And I can see that as firmly understandable. I mean, it's a point of mortality. And when, especially as someone like a homicide detective, there does come a point of almost cold disconnection. It's a body, it's a crime. And I can see how that could emotionally be confusing. Especially when faced with your own mortality. And did you know at the time when you came back that this was a near-death experience?
No. I just knew that I traveled and went somewhere. And I started really by just Googling, to try to find out some of these messages that I had received. But I was in that tunnel again, and that tunnel dropped me off into a different part of that city. And I was walking, and that other part of the city was just as beautiful as where I was before. And I didn't know where I was again, but I knew how to get back to those stairs. So I made my way back to where those stairs were. And I started to go up the stairs again. And this time, as soon as I heard the word, "There's Randy," I turned very quickly to see who was pulling me off the steps. And it was an older gentleman with a white beard, long white hair. And he was dressed in a beautiful gold white robe. And he was the one that would grab me off the staircase.
Now, you mentioned messages. Did those come in your later? Let's talk about that real quick. Some of the messages that you received while you were on the other side.
Yeah. My final NDE. I awoke. My consciousness awoke in a void, and It wasn't a pitch black void. It had some orbs of light that was traveling around me. And I had a spirit guide. I felt the presence of this spirit guide. And he indicated to me that we had to move on. We had to move into this void. And as I did, I suddenly found myself walking down or moving down this pathway. And it was a dirt pathway. And it was surrounded in beautiful trees and flowers. And you could see a river running past this pathway. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a little boy appeared. And he had 3/4 length pants on, no shirt, kind of the old bowl haircut, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very, very animated. You know, he was jumping up and down, yelling, "Follow me, follow me." So I followed him. And he took me into a room, beautiful decorated room. And he says, "Wait here." So I looked out the picture window, and this river ran underneath this building. And on the banks of the river were people just relaxing in conversation along the banks of this river. I don't know how long I was in the room. I didn't know how long I waited. But the little boy came back to me, and he said, "I'm sorry," but you have to leave. I said, "I don't want to leave." I said, "I feel so calm and so relaxed and so loved." I said, "I don't want to leave." And he said to me, "No, I'm sorry. Your room isn't ready. You have to leave."
Wow.
And with that, I was gone back into my dark, sedated world.
And you refer to this dark, sedated world. Explain that to the audience real quick. What it was like to be, I guess, under this almost perma-sedation, and having these machines help keep you alive.
Yeah, I mean, some period of time, it was almost like a sleep where you're just out. You're in darkness. Mm-hmm. I could hear my nurses. I could hear them. And a couple of them became my good friends. Couldn't talk to them.
Sure.
You know, occasionally I could see them. But I had one favorite nurse. Her name was Mallory. And when she came in, because being on an ECMO machine requires 2 nurses present in the room 24 hours a day. And when she was on duty, she would always come over and hold my hand and say, "Good morning, Mr. Randy. I'm here with you today. It's Mallory." And her voice became an angel to me. When I heard it, I just knew that I was going to be safe. And it's funny because after they extubated me and I could speak, I started apologizing to the nurses for yelling and screaming at them and cussing at them, you know. And they said, "Mr. Randy, you were sedated. You were on paralyzing medication.
You were intubated.
You were intubated.
You weren't saying any words.
You were on ECMO. You couldn't talk."
Wow.
So that all went on into my head.
Wow.
You know, I was present. I knew I was sick, and I knew I was present.
Yeah.
I had a whole conversation.
So you knew the difference between conscious sleep, things like that.
Yeah.
And you knew for certain that the voices and the spirits that talked to you were not the voices of the nurses or the doctors that looked after you.
I had a whole conversation with a nurse for days that didn't exist.
Wow.
Because I asked, when I went back to thank the nurses and the staff for caring for me, I said, where is the one older nurse, white hair? I said, she was from the Tampa Bay area, up here helping out with COVID patients. And I said, she never wore personal protection. She was the only one that never wore that. And they said, she wouldn't have been in the room. We all had to wear PPE. She wouldn't have been allowed in. I said, well, she always used to hold my hair and stroke my face. And she said, there's nobody on the staff like that.
Wow.
So I had a whole conversation with her, never.
Interesting.
While intubated.
And did any of the nurses report any experiences or report anything, I guess, occurring while you were having these episodes, while you were having the near-death experiences?
No, I was, like I said, I was completely sedated and paralyzed. I was just laying there.
Wow.
You know. But when I was in this dark void, my spirit indicated I had to move on. And suddenly off in the distance, this light started to materialize. And it just grew brighter and brighter and brighter until I recognized my deceased mother-in-law standing there. And she was sitting very regally in this chair, very proper, all dressed in white. She had her hair pulled up with a white ribbon. She had a white ribbon around her waist. Late 20s maybe, but she was sitting very, very regally. And I was crying out to her, Dolores, Dolores, it's me, it's Randy, I'm here. But she wouldn't acknowledge me. She would look at me, but then she would just look away. So my spirit guide indicated we need to move on. And as we got deeper into this void, I could see behind me her light slowly dimming away until she disappeared. But at the same time, there was another light in a distance that started to illuminate and get brighter and brighter and brighter. And there stood my dad, my mother, and my sister.
Wow.
All deceased.
And did you interact with them in any way? Did they interact with you?
They did not interact with me. I yelled at them, of course. Mom, Dad, it's me, Randy, I'm here. And I was so excited to see them. But I felt that there was a barrier between me and them. You know, I'm not sure if they could hear me or not, but there was this invisible barrier between the two of us. And I was yelling and screaming at them, and their light started to dim away. When suddenly, far, far away to my right-hand side, an orb of light caught my attention. And the orb was moving very fast toward me. And he came up around my right side, and he stopped right in front of me. And his face materialized for a brief second. And he says to me, tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay. And he moved on to a white porch, and he started making red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags. And I instantly knew he was a veteran. I just felt it, that he was a veteran. And it was about that time my spirit said, we have to go, you have to leave. And again, I returned to my dark, sedated world.
Now, in this third experience with the spirit guide this time, because you'd had people, you'd had spirits that you interacted with, spirits that came up and said, hey, you're not supposed to be here, the spirit that whisked you off the staircase. What was the spirit guide like?
He was like my mentor, you know, telepathically. I knew I was going to be safe. I had nothing to fear. And the calmness and serenity that I felt, I've never felt on earth. I was just so calm. And even though I couldn't see him, I felt very safe with him because he was guiding me to places where I needed to go.
Wow.
So when I came out of my coma, the only person I really trusted was my daughter to talk to. Didn't mention it to the doctors, didn't mention it to the nurses. So when my doctor, because I was trying to figure out what happened.
Sure.
You know, because I had no reference. And I wasn't brought up religiously.
Sure.
I didn't have any religious to the spiritual.
And how long were you in the coma?
22 days.
Wow.
22 days.
And this was after the first two experiences?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes. Because it's, you know, it's hard to say.
Sure.
Which one was first, which one was second, you know. But I feel that the spirit that gave me the message for his granddaughter came last. So I told my daughter what had happened, you know. And she said, "Who's Madison?" I said, "I do not know a Madison. I have no clue." "Who was the man that came to you?" She goes, I don't know. I never saw him before. Huh. "How are we going to find her?" And I said, "A veteran gave me a message. I have to find her. I have a responsibility to find her." So eventually I was released from the hospital in a wheelchair, eventually onto a walker. And I was back in my bedroom, and I started digging through my dresser drawers, that junk drawer, you know, that you keep throwing things in and never get a chance to clean out, you know. And I came across a business card to a local barber shop in town. So I took it out to my wife, and my daughter was there. And I said, "Could you guys call and find out what they're doing for haircuts? I'd like to get my hair cut." So I went back into my room, and a few minutes later, my daughter comes in, and she starts questioning me about this card. Where did I find it? How long have I had it? Where did I get it?
Yeah.
How long, you know, all these questions. So I finally said, "Lisa, what are you talking about?" And she said, "Dad, I think we found your Madison." I said, what are you talking about?" And she handed me the card, and here clearly written on the card was Madison Logan.
Wow.
So I said, "Make me an appointment with Madison. I want to talk to Madison." So we did, and we went down to see Madison, and my daughter had told her how sick I was. So we're sitting here she's cutting my hair, and I said, "Could I ask you some personal questions?" And she said, "Yeah, sure, you know, by all means." So I said, "Well, are both of your grandfathers still alive?" And she goes, "No." She said, "My one grandfather that I was closest with passed away less than a year ago." Now, remember, this was in 2020, March.
Yeah.
And he passed away in June of 2019. And I said, "Oh, did he live here in Florida? Did he live in the local area?" And she said, No. She says, "My whole family is from Iowa." She says, "I'm only down here because my husband received a doctorate degree in physical therapy, and he's getting some training in his first job." She says, "We're going to eventually return back to Iowa." So I figured I had the right girl. I said, "Was your grandfather a veteran?" And she said, "Oh, he talked about the Army and Vietnam." And By this time, she was getting a little curious of why I was asking all these questions. And I finally said to her, I think your grandfather came to me, and he has a message for you. And she's looking at me like I'm crazy, you know. And I said, Madison, these were his exact words. Tell Madison at the salon, your grandfather's okay. He wants to know that he is safe and he is okay. And you need not worry about him. So after we all composed ourselves, I asked her, I said, Madison, I said, he moved on to a white porch. Is that important to you? And she said that would have been his house in Iowa. It had a white porch, and he loved sitting on the white porch and talking to the people as they went by during the day. And I said, well, he showed me him making red, white, and blue American flags and ribbons. Is that somehow connected? Chris, she took a step back and looked at me like I had a third eye. And she said every Veterans Day, her whole family would get together and go down to the local American Legion where he belonged. And they made red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags for the veterans' graves.
Wow. Wow. That is beautiful. Amazing. And how have these experiences for you, and especially that experience of having that confirmed by a unknown party, literally unknown party, how has that changed you, Randy? I mean, there's one thing to having been a homicide detective, and I would love to have you on sometime just to talk about your vast experience with that.
Sure.
Because that's an incredible life to live. But how have these experiences changed you and changed the way that you look at life, people, the world around you?
Complete 180 degrees. As a homicide detective, I was very aggressive. You know, my master's degree is in forensic science.
Oh, wow.
So my whole world evolved around physical evidence.
Yeah.
I had to have the fiber. I had to have the blood. I had to have somebody's DNA. I had to have the hair. I had to have the fingerprints.
Yeah.
I had to have that physical evidence to prove to me that something happened. And then my job was to find out, based on my evidence, who did it. That was my whole world. I was very much a type A personality. I didn't trust people. I don't know how my wife put up with me for 50 years, because we were celebrating our 50-year wedding anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I don't know how she did it, you know, because I put that work first above them. You know, if I had an interview to do, if I had a surveillance I had to do, if I had to go interpret some evidence, or I had to go do an experiment.
Yeah, you're not
with evidence.
You're not going to not answer the phone when it rings.
Correct. She's missed birthdays, concerts.
Yeah.
We've missed them all as a family. So that's the type of person that I was. Very tense, very confrontational, you know, as a person. And I say all the time, and I realize COVID is still a terrible, terrible disease.
Absolutely.
And I wish it upon no one. But COVID saved my life, you know.
Wow.
Because I believe God gave it to me because he knew I needed to change. Maybe I was on that wrong path. And he wanted me, because I was a skeptic, major skeptic, you know. I wanted to believe, but nobody gave me that proof.
Sure.
I went to church, and what did they say? In hopes of rising again. You don't know?
Yeah.
It's a church. You don't know. You're
There's
hoping.
no definitive here?
Yeah, we're hoping we're going to raise again, you know.
Yeah.
So I just went through the motions, you know. Like I said, I was never religious. My family didn't read the Bible. We didn't talk about God. We certainly didn't talk about death, because my father died at a very young age, and I was 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I tried to save him and couldn't. I lived with that guilt and that loss for 50 years.
Yeah.
You know? But now, even my family say, Dad, you're not the same person. I'm softer, you know? I'm in a deeper relationship with my wife and my family now. We have conversations now that we would never have, you know?
Yeah.
Before COVID, pre-COVID. I can talk about God and Jesus and the Bible and heaven, and I wouldn't have done that before, because I would have walked away when those conversations started. Interesting.
And one of the things that we talk about regularly on this show is the adverse side of experience. Frequently, you are one of the people that we have heard from who is an experiencer that did not hide their story for a decade, 20 years, half their life, for fear of either ridicule, even holding city office, things like that.
Not sure what happened to them.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Even if this experience had happened to you while you were an active detective.
Yeah.
You know,
things may have been different.
Exactly. You know, like that's stuff that can absolutely be used in a court of law. Yeah. And, you know, like, oh, well, you know, he says this happened. How much, if he's willing to accept that without evidence, what about this?
He's crazy. We're going to take this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes for people to come forward with their story of experience. What words would you have for those out there that have had an NDE, and even those that, much like your daughter, much like your wife, are the other experiencers of the NDE? You know, because they had their experience during that also, while you were having your experiences. What advice would you have for those people?
When I came home a few weeks later, I think a little bit of that detective side kicked in. And I had to understand what happened to me. So I went to social media and I started Googling, you know, after death communication.
Sure.
Golden City, and it kept coming back to these near-death experiences. So that drove me to look into that more. And as I told my story to family and some friends, they all encouraged me, you have to get this word out. People need this feeling of hope, and especially with COVID. And of where their loved ones are, and what they are experiencing, and that they are safe, and they are pain-free, and that they are in a better place. So to answer that first part, that's why I started telling my story early on. And my daughter goes to a particular church there where we live, and she happened to mention it to her pastor. And he has to come in to talk to us. And I ended up doing a presentation to their senior ministry, and every one of them said, you have to get this word out. God sent you back to spread this story of hope and love.
Yeah.
And I felt committed to do it. I think that's why he sent me here.
That's beautiful, Randy.
You know, to be able to do that. I tell people all the time when they ask me, okay, I'm a non-believer. I'm not sure about the afterlife. That's your opinion. You know, I can only tell you what happened to me.
Yeah.
And what I experienced. But hopefully, what I have told you will give you some peace, knowing that your spirit is not going to die, that you are going to transition and be in a much better place. A lot of people call it, you're going to go home, because that's where we came from, you know. And for some reason, God is putting me into people's life that need to hear that story. As an example, I was down here in the lobby just the other day, and I see this lady walking by, and she looks so familiar to me. And she wasn't part of the conference, you know. And I kept looking, and I suddenly realized she was a stewardess on an airplane coming from Dallas to Salt Lake City. So I walked up to her, and I said, hi. I said, fancy running into you here. I said, you probably don't remember me. I said, but you were the stewardess on our plane. And she goes, oh, what, yesterday coming up from Dallas? And I said, yeah. And so we talked about flying and things for a few minutes. And she said, oh, what is all of your name tag and what are you doing here? And I said, I'm here at a conference and International Association for Near-Death Studies. And she kind of looked at me and she says, what's the green experiencer mean? And I said, it means that I've been to heaven, I experienced heaven, and I was allowed to come back to share my story. And she starts crying. And I said, are you okay? I said, I'm so sorry. You know, did I say something? And she goes, no, you don't understand. I had a niece die 30 minutes ago, and I just got notified. She goes, I needed to hear this.
That's beautiful.
Tell me more. And I sat and told her of what heaven is like and what I experienced while I was there. And that's not the first time something like that has happened to me.
Yeah.
So I think I'm a messenger, you know, and he puts these people in front of me so I can give them peace about their loved one.
That is amazing, and an amazing change in life and in spirit for you, Randy. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, your many stories. Let everybody know, because unfortunately your book is not here on the table. It is yet to be released.
Yes.
It is coming out, but let everybody know what the book is, where they will be able to find it, and if you have a website or anything like that, let the folks know.
Okay. Yeah, I am writing my book. I have my book cover finalized, and it's being edited. It's called To the Veil and Back, Surviving COVID-19, and it's about a family's odyssey, because it's a two-pronged book, because my family, unbeknownst to me, took the hospital head on to get me that convalescent plasma, because the hospital wasn't going to give it to me. It was too experimental.
Yeah.
And they insisted on doing it. My family found the donor to have it done, you know. So it talks about their story and how they manipulated and worked through the hospital. On the other side, it talks about my development of how I developed my lack of God and my trust in God, and the fact that he became a distant figure in my life, but yet how COVID saved it, and now how I am so much spiritual. Talk to him every day. I thank him every day for all the blessings that he has given to me. So it's that type of a... And my daughters have written 3 paragraphs in the book.
Oh, wow.
To share their story about how their dad was in the hospital and they weren't ready to lose me.
Wow.
So hopefully it will be out. We're hoping for the end of the year. You can go to theveilandback.gmail.
Okay.
.com and a pre-order.
Okay.
And as soon as it's out, we'll get in touch with you and we'll get a copy off.
Absolutely. And we would love to have you back on whenever the book is released.
Love to
get more in depth into these stories. Thank you so much once again for your time during this very busy IANDS 2022 conference, Randy. Greatly
Chris,
appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely pleasure.
Please, while you're online, checking out everything from totheveilandback.com.
Gmail.com. Gmail.
Oh,
yeah.
totheveilandback@gmail.com. Make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes, interviews, our Knowledge Vault, our free app. That is where you can tune in live every Tuesday. So look forward to more interviews here at IANDS 2022 coming up right after this, folks. We'll be right back.